Hello, and welcome to Question in a Bottle. In this series of short discussions, private investor Mark Atkinson answers questions sent in by listeners and subscribers to his main podcast, The Desert Island Investor. So, let's take a look and see what's in the bottle that washed up on the beach today.
Right, Paul, we have a question from Anthony Beech. That's beach as in tree and not as in the sand that we're sat on. And Anthony asks, which broker do you use and why? So this is a pertinent question, as I've recently transferred to a new broker, and I'll reveal my options and the decision-making process. If you go onto the London Stock Exchange website, they conveniently have a section, Find a Broker, where they list, I think it's 54 different brokers. And they also give a description of the types of broker you can find. So there's three categories. The first is execution only, probably the most common, and that applies to me. And it says, only use your broker to buy and sell shares with no provision of advice about the suitability or risks associated with your investments. This service is best suited to experienced investors aware of their investment strategies. The next one is advisory, and it says, in this case, you will receive advice about which securities to buy or sell. However, your broker won't be allowed to trade without your prior permission. You will spend time with your broker discussing your objectives, but ultimately investment decisions rest with you. And lastly, discretionary. Finally, a discretionary account gives complete authority to your broker to buy and sell shares on your behalf. Prior to any investing decision, you will discuss thoroughly your needs and risk profile. Brokers will then send regular reports about what's in your portfolio and how much it is worth. So I would imagine that advisory and discretionary are more involved, and I would fully expect that the fees associated will be somewhat higher. So there's a lot to consider with selecting your broker, and they all offer varying fee structures, and it's very difficult to compare. You're not comparing like with like, you're comparing oranges with lemons. And what is a good fit for me might be totally wrong for somebody else. So we'll be returning to that well-worn saying, do your own research. Now, there are a number of things to consider. Are you likely to be investing in shares, funds, or a mixture of both? There are different fees for people holding shares or funds. How often do you expect to trade? Trading fees vary. How much are you likely to have invested? Some brokers charge a percentage of the portfolio, others a flat fee. Do you expect to hold much cash? Some brokers pay interest on cash deposits, others don't. Will the broker trade the shares that you wish to hold? Some do not trade some of the, shall we say, a little bit more esoteric shares. You should be trying to judge what profile of investor you are and select the right broking partner. Do you think your broker is an established, profitable and viable business? Your investments within them should be ring-fenced, but if they go bust, you could struggle to access the funds while all these things are being sorted out. And also, if you decide to move to broker B from broker A, are there any exit charges or admin fees which may be punitive? Also, what level of general service do they provide? You are likely never to have dealt with them before, and this is where online reviews and personal contacts can be very useful. Ask people that you know, how do you find Bill Smith brokers? Now, I was until recently with Charles Stanley Direct, who I've been with for 7 years. And previous to that, I was with Barclays for a long time and very happy. Unfortunately for me, Barclays brought in what they call Smart Investor, and with that, a new fee structure. They claim that 90% of clients will be better off and only 10% worse off. And that will be typically those with large portfolios and in shares and not funds, which was exactly my category. Now, unfortunately, I was in that 10%, and not being a member of the 90% better off, it was of little comfort to me. So I'm sure Barclays would like investors with funds, as they enjoy those trail commissions, or investors that keep trading and churning their portfolios and racking up those charges. Whereas with me paying a nominal platform fee and trading very rarely, they were seeing a very low percentage of my share portfolio. And, in a way, I suppose I was not playing the game, and Barclays wanted their fair share of my juicy portfolio. So they addressed this by bringing in a commission-based structure around the size of my portfolio. And this resulted, or would have resulted, in my fees going up by about eightfold. So I was also told that I would no longer be able to hold some more enterprises, as this required a W8 BEM form. And this hadn't been a problem previously, but this was another change. And there were lots of features that were absent, and it was a lot more clunky. And I would describe what they offered as dumbed down. And the response times were terrible. Some of the valuations were inaccurate. And there were a lot of complaints and articles in the financial press. And I sadly moved on, only after I received, some compensation into the bargain for their poor level of service. So I cannot see how a broker can justify a percentage of my portfolio. They don't take any risk. They're not managing my money. They're purely an administrator providing a service, including an ISA wrapper. And there's no greater workload whether I own 1,000 shares or 100,000, other than them having to type in a few more zeros. So why should the broker benefit through my thrift or perspicacity? I select the companies and I commit my cash. And if I call it right and it multi-bags, then why should the broker receive extra? So I had a look around and I decided upon Charles Stanley. Now, they too had a commission-based system at 0.35%. However, it was capped at £240. Now, this was considerably less than Barclays. And in addition, if I placed a trade during the month at £11.50, I didn't pay any account fees. So ever since I'd been with Charles Stanley, I'd placed a trade each month, and 12 £11.50s is £138. So that trading pattern dovetails with my style nicely. Most months I'd add to an existing holding, but it gives me sufficient maneuverability, or if I occasionally wish to sell or buy a new position. So, if I wanted, I have on occasion traded twice a month. These are some heady days. So I did earlier mention viability. And until a couple of years ago, when they received a takeover, Charles Stanley were listed on the London Stock Exchange. And as such, I had good visibility of their accounts. And, it was encouraging that they were profitable. However, important that I was not a major contributor personally. But this came from other people. So to be fair to Charles Stanley, and I do like to be fair, they had not increased their fees in those 7 years. However, at the end of June, they announced a new structure, which was heralded as good news. And also, you do not need to do anything. Now, those words always prompt me to investigate if there is something indeed that needs to be done. Now, Charles Stanley were lowering their fees to 0.3%, but raising the cap to £600. However, as a valued customer, this will be kept to £300 for at least the next 2 years. Now, withdrawn was the deal whereby if you trade during a month, you don't pay any account fees. Now, thrown in, there will be 5 free trades every 6 months. Keep up with this. And the standard trading fee came down to £10. So in order to have the same service as I had previously, this meant that £300 plus £20 is £320 versus that £138. That's more than double. But it's a net £182. So my thought process, yes, it hasn't changed in 7 years. It's still a very, very small percentage of the portfolio. It's not life-changing. And worst of all, and admission, can I be bothered? It's inertia. Against that, it's £182. And we could do something with that, a nice meal at the Ivy. And it's another £182 next year. And then the prospect of that temporary cap being lifted, and it's £600. And as well, I do not want to enter into bad and sloppy habits. I don't want them to start creeping in. I've got to where I am today exactly because I wasn't not blasé about £182. So, that's net, of course, isn't it? 182 is after the tax that we earn. So I did contact Charles Stanley to see if there's something that they could do, and that's always a first option, easy option. But as expected, they said, no, sorry. So my first port of call was having a look round. I had a look at Interactive Investor, and they have several options, and their investor plan seemed a good fit. Now, that's £11.99 per month with one free trade per month, similar to Charles Stanley. So that's £143.88 annually for my trading pattern. And additional trades were just £3.99. So before throwing the big switch, remembering the Somero problem with Barclays, I asked if they could first check that my stocks were all compatible. Now, unfortunately, this was not the case. I would have to initiate the transfer, and only then would I be told if any of the holdings were problematic. Now, I did, however, verify that if this was the case, the whole transfer could be halted and reversed at no cost. So, in the event, Somero was fine, but they could not accommodate the newly born Smurfit West Rock, which was Smurfit Kappa, a core holding of mine, and that's recently merged with WestRock and has a primary US listing and a secondary one on London. So part of me thought, well, I can justify to myself that I've tried, but as Macbeth said, I'm in blood stepped in so far that I weighed no more, returning was as tedious and going over, and what kept gnawing away at me was how this was marketed. Perhaps, if the good news had been pitched as important news, and instead of that, you don't need to do anything that the following is important and needs your attention, then perhaps I would have been more understanding. I just did think it was slightly disingenuous and perhaps what you could call sharp practice. So the next one I had a look at was AJ Bell, and they charge 0.25%. That's capped at £3.50 per month. So that's just £42. And a trade is £5. So that would be £60. So that's £102 in total. That's nice. Unfortunately, they were unable to accept either Smurfit or Somero. So, as an aside, if you do more than 10 trades in a month, the trading fee drops to £3.50. So, as listeners will know, I'm light years away from this. Then there was Halifax. They charge a £36 flat fee. Trading charges were £9.50. So that's £150 all in. And in addition, they do an offer where a trade is just £3.50 once per month during a 2-hour time window. So that could potentially be just £78. But how convenient may that be if I'm not in a position to trade that day, or if I'm in company, I'm out at lunch or on a plane, I'm swimming in Mauritius. But I rang them and it took a long time to answer. The person didn't seem to have a full command of the subject and had to obtain information from the transfer department. I was then cut off and had to ring back. They could accept Somero and Smurfit West Rock, but it's first impressions. And despite having an economical offer, I dropped it from my considerations on service grounds. They just didn't give me confidence. Now, out of interest, I revisited my old friends Barclays, and they charge 0.25% on the first £200,000. So that's £500. And then 0.05% on everything above. There's no ceiling. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Trades are £6 each. So that is £72 for me. Now, purely for example purposes, this is just purely an example. If my portfolio was £500,000, fees would be £650. That's plus that £72, which was 722. £1 million portfolio would be £972, and a £2 million portfolio, £1,472. So from memory, these rates are actually more competitive than when I left. And then I spoke to Hargreaves Lansdowne and Emily. I remember speaking to Emily. She was crisp and efficient. She knew her subject. She didn't need to refer to anybody. I asked her to email some information, which she did promptly. I was not cut off. All my stocks were acceptable. Hargreaves Lansdowne charge a 0.45% capped at £45. So that's £10,000 worth of investments, and trades are £11.95. Lower again if you are a multiple trader. Now that's £188.40 for me on my pattern. So that's £131.60 saving on Charles Stanley. So Hargreaves Lansdowne, unlike Charles Stanley, also pay interest on their cash deposits, so I understand. Now, I hold very little cash and as fully invested. It's not a major thing, but it's some small way it helps the cause. So I've gone with Hargreaves Lansdowne, and we'll see in time if it's been a wise decision. Now, Charles Stanley charge generally £10 for a stock to transfer to another broker. However, this is waived if they've received the transfer request before the new fees come into play. And I had a month to act, and I understand this is a standard procedure. Now I've 33 stocks, so you can see that if I'd missed that window, the economics of transferring change, and I could have been locked in. So it could have been a bit like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. And another consideration is that while the transfer is taking place, you're prohibited from dealing. So this may take a couple of 3 weeks. Now, for those that trade on a regular basis, or those that want to withdraw funds, this could be problematic. And also, if it coincided with a crash and the market tanking, then you may feel powerless and impotent. For those like me with my system of infrequent trading, always staying the course and having other funds available elsewhere, I can't see much of an inconvenience. So I'm not suggesting any broker. I've just gone through what I've done from my own personal circumstances, and there's lots of options. And, there may be a better one out for you out there. I've just touched on my personal situation. And there are multiple aspects to consider. And, all I would part with is saying, once again, I'm returning to the acronym DYOR, do your own research.
Well, that's all for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember the content is for information only and it is not financial advice. If you have a question for Mark for our Question in a Bottle podcast, just complete the form on our website, thedesertislandinvestor.co.uk. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.